This is stupid. This is so
frickin'
stupid. But Ochako and Todoroki, we made a bet, and I won, but they say that I lost. And if I don't do this, they're gonna take my All Might merch.
But limited edition All Might onesie is too good to give up.
So I guess I don't have a choice. And I normally don't listen to people,
But it came with matching slippers.
but that All Might merch was expensive. So hello, and welcome back, I
frickin'
guess. Today,
Never again will I cat sit for Mr. Aizawa.
we're gonna be reading Bakudeku fanfiction. It's not like I've ever owned. It's called Socks Before Pants by Dean vs. Panties.
Be more enthusiastic, Bakugo.
Can you literally shut the
Frick.
up?
Don't be mean to Ochako.
Like literally, it's not that hard. Summary: after a difficult job in their internship, Katsuki and Izuku endure their pain in the way they always did from their childhood. Or the one where they hug each other for the first time since they stopped being friends. Mother. Alright, well I'm sure I'm gonna love this. After the most recent villain attack on the— I'm allowed to eat while I do this. After the most recent villain attack on the elementary school, the team of interns involved were given a week off. More like forced to have a week off. Katsuki didn't know why. It's not like any of them had time to be lazing around. So instead he trained. He was on his 315th push-up. And once he couldn't use his arms anymore, he would start squats. Becoming a hero was top priority. Villains didn't rest just because a bunch of kids died. Jesus. Katsuki felt the sweat dripping off his nose and his jaw clenched, his form only quaking from the effort he was putting into the push-ups. And what happened out there didn't affect him. He could fight villains right now and win just like he always did in his internship. And he understood that not every person could be saved. He always knew that. What mattered most was stopping the villains as soon as he could. He couldn't save everyone. The salty substance dripping down his face was sweat. He clenched his teeth angrily. It was sweat. He couldn't move his— this is gonna be sad, isn't it? He couldn't move his arms anymore. It was just because he was tired.
Gosh dang it.
He collapsed on the floor, his fist balling so hard that his nails bit the callous skin of his palms. He clenched his teeth as the emotion blazed through him like a fire, consuming him and burning him so brightly that he was blinded. Explosions started going off in his palms, scorching the floorboards beneath instead of the cursed images in his mind. He could see their small innocent faces bearing horrific expressions as the villains stole their last breaths. Kachan, said a voice breaking through the consciousness and pulling him back to reality. He wrenched his head up violently, his palms aiming at the door where the voice came from. His eyes were wide and his senses on fire, and his mind was so weighted with the images and feelings that he couldn't form even one sensible thought other than the fact that there was suddenly a lot of green in his vision. He took several deep breaths, knowing he had to calm down. Being a hero wasn't a shoot first, asked questions later occupation, as he thought for so many years. He breathed evenly through his mouth, and the sparks in his palms dying down to smoldering plumes of smoke. His vision started to clear, and the green blob quickly took the form of Deku in his field of vision. Deku. He curled his lips and ground his teeth together in rage. "What the f*** are you doing here?" he growled. "I heard you screaming and your explosions, so I came to check on you," he said. And though he refrained from saying things like, "I was worried about you," or "I wanted to come help," Katsuki could see it in his
Gosh dang.
expression. It wasn't pity like he always thought, but the alternative was hardly any better. He held that look in his eyes. He could see everything about Katsuki, like the blonde was some
Thing.
open book for him to read at his will. "Get the
Frick.
out, Deku." "No. You wanna
Frickin'
die?
butthole.
I want to make sure you don't hurt yourself or break any school property. It's none of your
Gosh dang.
business," he screamed, hating how his voice cracked. Feeling that tone of his voice was giving away more and more of how he really felt about that mission. "It's not, but it feels like it," Deku admitted with a sigh. "Look, I can't sleep, and I'm clearly not the only one. I don't want to be alone, so can I come in?" Katsuki's lips parted in shock, not expecting such an open admission, but knowing he should have. Deku always left his emotions on his sleeve for everyone to see. Why would this be any different? Deku was likely being honest about his feelings now, Katsuki noted. There were bags under his eyes, his freckles standing out in a dark contrast across his pallid skin. His form held a slump to it that only came from exhaustion, and he looked like he was too tired to fight about anything at all. Katsuki clenched his teeth and fist and snarled before standing up, storming to the bathroom and slamming the door. He heard the door to his room closed, and he wondered for a moment if the nerd had left, only to be proved wrong by the padding of the feet on the floor. Katsuki scrubbed his face with cold water and looked at his expression in the mirror, finding it to be just as wrecked as Deku's. He sighed, turning off the faucet and going back to the main room, seeing Deku sitting on the floor beside his bed. He curled a lip on instinct, the form of the boy causing him disgust for so many years. It was just a habit that refused to break. He didn't feel disgust for Deku anymore, though. Their relationship was different, to say the least. They still argued and fought, but it wasn't out of hatred. Katsuki tolerated his presence and even acknowledged him as a rival on the same level as him. Don't get me wrong, Deku was still a nerd, as he should be. He was still annoyingly reckless and persistent in his drive to become better than Katsuki. All of these things were irritating, but he didn't hate them, even if it was what he constantly insisted. He didn't hate Deku, but they weren't quite friends either. They didn't know how to be friends anymore. Too many years passed since the time they'd been so. So what? He asked when the silence dragged on for a bit too long. You get to sit there on my floor all night? Deku huffed. Maybe it's better than being alone in my room. Katsuki rolled his eyes and sat on the bed, resting his arms on his knees as he dried his face with a towel. He didn't know what to expect now. He steeled himself for an attempt at having a heart-to-heart, like how he would let himself be weak in front of Deku of all people. But it never came. He prepared himself for Deku to start crying, but he never did. He half expected the nerd to try and initiate excruciating small talk or just ramble on about nonsense like he always did. But he didn't. He was completely silent. Katsuki hated the uncomfortable feeling rising deep within in regards to Deku. He hated wasting his emotions on this asshole, but now he wasn't able to rest until he found out what the frick was making him act so strangely. It had to be the attack, right? Too many kids died for it not to affect someone so empathetic as Deku. He was definitely not okay. Katsuki growled in frustration, baring his teeth. That guy's getting a life sentence, he said. It was a fact, that's all it was. I know. So then, he won't do that anymore. You're right. Hey baby, I'm gonna finish recording this video real quick and then I'll call you back, okay? You're out of toilet paper? I literally have like 5 more minutes. You're such an butthole. Katsuki growled in frustration. If you're gonna sit here on my floor and blame yourself, then you can get the frick out right now. I'm sorry. You can't just say sorry and keep doing it. Dang it. Deku looked up at him, his expression even more wrecked than before. Katsuki imagined he'd already cried so much that he didn't even have any more tears left to cry. Against his will, his face softened. He sighed and stood up, dragging Deku along with him. He stood before his ex-best friend with his feet shoulder-width apart and his arms outstretched. Deku looked up at him and tilted his head in confusion. What are you doing? You're the kind who likes this kind of thing. You always needed it when you were over and whining about the thunder outside. We couldn't even watch scary movies without you hanging all over me. Katsuki tried to fight the heat rising in his cheeks. Ew. He looked studiously away as Deku's eyes burned holes in him that left him feeling open and exposed. Kachan, are you suggesting we hug? The word looked like it tasted weird in Deku's mouth, but it was even stranger in Katsuki's ears. I didn't frickin' say that, he barked. He didn't even drop his arms despite how much he wanted to kick Deku out right now, if only to save himself from the embarrassment. He tensed when, after what felt like an entire freaking minute, he heard Deku take a tentative step forward. He moved until Katsuki could feel the heat radiating from his body, until he could smell the zesty fragrance of his shampoo. It made him wonder what brand it was. Did Deku choose it himself? Had he been looking for this brand in particular, or was it just something efficient and cheap? What was Deku's life like now? What kind of music did he like? What was his favorite food? It's Katsudan. His life, he still hangs out with me. It's just I'm less nice now. What was his favorite food? His favorite color? What kind of person did Izuku Midoriya grow up to be? It irritated him because while Deku seemed to know everything about Katsuki, Katsuki didn't know anything about the nerd anymore. He wasn't expecting his heart to clench painfully in his chest from admitting that. He wasn't even aware that he cared until now. He'd known everything about Deku before. Katsuki knew the boy was afraid of the dark, liked Katsudan, needed to put socks on first before pants simply because it felt nicer. Dumbass. Was Deku still like that? How much was the solid young man before him still like the gentle friend from his childhood memories? They were chest to chest now, and the longer Deku lingered, the stranger it felt to breathe each other's air, to exist in each other's space. He could smell him past the soap now. He could smell a gentle, inoffensive musk that washed over Katsuki as a fresh spring day. He looked down at Deku's freckled cheeks, dyed pink, his hands fuming nervously, chewing on his lip in the infuriating way he always did. Maybe he wasn't as different as Katsuki initially thought. He couldn't stop his body from moving, his arms wrapped tightly around Deku's shoulders. Oh, I'm gonna throw up. Pulling him close so that their bodies connected from their head to toe. Deku jumped as though surprised that this was actually happening. He should have been. Because what in the universe would Bakugou Katsuki hug Izuku Midoriya? It seemed ridiculous even to Katsuki himself. Deku's arms hung awkwardly in the air over Katsuki, and it wasn't long before he sighed and clenched at Katsuki's shirt, pulling him impossibly closer and burying his face into the crook of his neck. All the tension in his body seemed to melt away. Deku didn't— Nitro.
1 hour later.
Are you quite finished? Pretty girl. Come here, pretty girl. All the tension in his body seemed to melt away. Deku didn't bother trying to stop himself from molding his form against Katsuki's as he started to sob either. Katsuki felt his body shiver, and then pleasant tingles washed over him. He relaxed just a little as nostalgia ignited like a wildfire. Deku, never one to half-ass a hug, performed admirably, taking full advantage of the leeway he'd been given to soak Katsuki's shirt with his tears. Apparently he had more to cry after all. Katsuki wrapped his arms tighter around the smaller, quaking form and buried his face into Deku's fluffy hair, inhaling deeply. He hated how much he liked this, how much he apparently needed this, how much he didn't want it to stop. He was being held together by Deku's arms, and if he stopped now, he would fall apart. Hugs were supposed to stop after a certain socially acceptable time frame, but not this one. Apparently, he didn't know how long they remained that way, but eventually Deku pulled back, their bodies still pressed together, arms still wrapped around each other, their faces aflame. Deku looked up at him, his thumbs rubbing circles into Katsuki's shoulder blades, and he smiled brightly. It's been a while, but Kachan still gives the best hugs.
Frickin'.
Of course I do. Katsuki could feel the heat spreading to his ears. Izuku laughed nervously. I don't want to let go. Oh, this love stuff. Katsuki swallowed and pulled him close, leaning in and nuzzling behind his ear as he spoke. Then don't. Oh my god, I'm feeling. He felt Deku shiver in his— Jesus. He felt Deku shiver in his arms. Felt his breath hitch in his throat. Kachan, do you still put on your socks before pants? What? Just
Frickin'.
Stay here for tonight. Ow! I'm having chest pain. I think I need to go to the hospital. Something is beating in here. I haven't felt this in a couple of years. Izuku smiled softly and rested his head on Katsuki's shoulders as their heartbeats thumped gently against each other. The soft whisper against his neck sent shivers of contentment down Katsuki's spine. Okay. Oh, Jesus. They hugged the same way they did as children, but they weren't friends anymore. This was the beginning to a new chapter in their relationship, an entirely different one that Katsuki was almost afraid to explore. But he wasn't afraid. Izuku was still Izuku, regardless of how much time had passed, and Katsuki was still Katsuki, despite all the awful things he'd done. With the way Deku clutched desperately at his back and Katsuki craved the warmth of his skin, it was clear they both needed this. They both needed each other. Katsuki would hug Deku every day for the rest of his life if it meant being by his side once again. Of course I'm gonna have that dumb every day for the rest of my life. He never leaves me the frick alone. Well, that made me feel things that I didn't want to feel. That was
Frickin'.
awful.
Well, I'm adding that to my favorites and reading it every night for the rest of my life.
Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video or whatever. I'd never want to do this again. I'd never want to do this again.
I want to do this every day for the rest of my life. I hope I can make a job out of this so I can read every single Bakudeku fanfiction that ever existed. God, that was amazing.
So, like this video if you enjoyed that, I guess. Give it a thumbs up because I'm the best one. I'm the best. Period. You can subscribe and click the bell. That way every single time that dumb posts a new video, you'll get notified. She posts on Tuesdays, Fridays, and every other Sunday because she's annoying. Anyways, I love you or whatever. Bye. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I tried to really stay in character for this one and harness my inner asshole to correctly portray how I think Katsuki would read this story. I love this story so much. Personally, it's actually one of my favorites, and after I read it, I actually tried putting on socks before pants, and it's quite comfortable if anyone was wondering. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see me do more videos like this where I try and stay in character, comment down below which characters you'd like to see next. I believe that's it, so remember to stay safe, do your homework, and drink water, and I love you so much. Bye!